Hello, everybody, and welcome to B-Sides. For this session, we will have Scott J. Roberts talking about building effective machine augmented intelligence. Slides will be collected over Slido. You can get details for Slido at BSidesSF.com/Q&A. Submit questions there. We'll be taking them once the talk is over.
All right.
Take it away.
Thanks, Devin. Or Damien. I was going to get that right eventually. I was just actually telling Damien I finally found a way to not be nervous before a talk, which is be doing your last minute review and realize you forgot a slide. It's on your laptop that's back in your hotel. So I have to turn around, run over to your hotel, get your laptop, come back, fix it, and then move forward. So that's where we're at right now. If that wasn't enough, I've got this light in my face and I can't see any of you. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just Damien and I having a nice conversation. So this is Skynet the CTI Intern. I'll talk about why I got to that in a second. First of all, the obligatory, who am I? My name is Scott Roberts. I am the head of threat research at Interpres. No, it's not Interpress. It's not Interprise. If you're French, I'll let you get away with Interpre, but that's about it. I've had a 20-year career spanning incident response, threat detection, and cyber threat intelligence. I've worked some places you might have heard of. Isn't that great? I'm also getting a master's in anticipatory intelligence at Utah State University. So for the B-Sides folks, the reason my slides were late, sorry, finals. And at the same time, they also let me teach cybersecurity at the same time at Utah State, which is a lot of fun. So I want to start by actually setting expectations. I'm going to start with what this talk is not. So I am not dropping any new cool foundational models for cybersecurity. I asked my bosses for a few $100 million in A100s. They wouldn't give them to me, so I can't generate any new models. I'm not releasing any software or products. And I'm also not going to do a series of perfect prompts. So I'm guessing there's some folks who are working with AI in the audience. You may see some things where you go, hey, there was a way easier way to have done that, or you could have done this or that. Please come talk to me afterwards. This was an experiment. This was a series of experiments, and I'm still going through them. So I'd really like it if we could have that conversation because I want to do these things better. So what we are going to talk about, though, is the pros and cons of trying to take all these new tools that are going on and integrate them into real-world workflows that I was dealing with. And I think that's actually a really good metaphor for kind of the entire set of talks, which is this idea of setting expectations. I have the weird place, again, being around students, I get to see how they use large language models a lot, and I get to kind of be a voice in the room. And it's funny because I feel like half the time I'm the guy who's going, it's not everything you want it to be. It's not going to solve all your problems. It's not perfect. And then at the same time, I end up being the guy who's going, well, no, actually it can do a whole lot more than you think it can, and take some time and work with it. Because, you know, I find the people who think that these tools are going to do everything or can't do anything are generally people who haven't spent a lot of time with them and actually used them. So that's what we're going to do. Most of the stuff I'm doing, I just happen to use OpenAI because it's what my company uses. Nothing we're doing is particularly specific to one. So if you're saying, hey, I'm an Anthropic shop, I think a lot of this stuff should still apply. So we're going to talk about the problem. We're going to talk about kind of the use cases I have and then walk through what got us there. And we'll have a little conclusion at the end. So the problem. Interpres, this is not an Interpres ad, is a continuous threat exposure management platform. If you want to know what that means, come find me afterwards. But the result is, as the head of threat research, my job is to try to understand every threat actor out there. For those of you who've been following the news, there's a lot of them right now. It's a very busy job. And so I did the default thing, which was I sat in a corner and cried for a while at how much reading I had to do. And then I pulled out a Python prompt and started automating things. And that's what got us to where we're at now. And in particular, a lot of what I'm trying to do is build MITRE ATT&CK representations of content MITRE hasn't gotten to yet. Love the MITRE ATT&CK team. It's a fantastic project. They've done so many cool things, but they also have to read all this stuff, and they also have a lot of time to go through it. And so I need to do it a little bit faster than they do, so I'm automating. But before I started automating, I had Chandler. Just so you know, it's not the costume character dog up in the top. Chandler's the guy down here at the bottom. So he was my former threat engineering intern at Interpres. He's a Utah State senior, runs our cybersecurity org. Absolutely fantastic, and honestly, having him around as I was getting a lot of this stuff going was super useful because there were tasks I understood but didn't have time to do or was getting pulled a different direction, and I could say, hey Chandler, can you go do X, Y, Z, or can you double check me on this, or can you work through it? And so when he moved on to do other things, as college kids are wont to do, I had to find some solutions. So again, being in a master's program, I defaulted to a literature review. And I found 3 resources I'd really point you at. So, not surprisingly, most of the cool work that I'm seeing, at least from LLM providers, are coming from Google and Microsoft. And so Google Cloud put out this fantastic post about the 5 phases of threat intelligence and AI. Came up with some good ideas based on that, but not a lot that was really directly applicable. Google, again, put out this Supercharging Security with Generative AI. Again, an interesting read, but it was more for the links than it was for any particular insight I took out of it. But this one, from Thomas, I'm never gonna get his last name right, so I'm not gonna try. Applying LLMs to threat intelligence, an absolutely fantastic blog post. And when I say it was fantastic, I mean it was on Medium behind a paywall, and I signed up for a Medium account and paid for it just so I could look at this post again. So at the very least, it was worth $5. But he does a really great job of going into a bunch of these really key ideas, prompt engineering, few-shot prompting, RAG, in actual code. And he does show you what he actually did so you can recreate it and build off of that. So super, super useful. So now that I had some ideas, I kind of looked at what were the problems I was having, what were the things I was doing, what was the stuff I used to ask Chandler to do, and I started coming up with use cases. And the first one was pretty simple, summary generation. And so in each of these cases, we kind of came up with a theory and said, hey, we think AI might be able to help us with this problem. What's success criteria look like? What's the problem? And then we experimented with it. So in this case, pretty straightforward. We're pulling in a lot of news articles from different vendors. Maybe some of you are in this room. In that case, thank you. But often, the hard part with these things is you don't know if they're going to be relevant to you until you've read all the way through them. So we wanted to put better summaries of these articles out there so that we and our customers could evaluate whether or not a particular threat or campaign was relevant to them. So Microsoft put out this post a year ago or so about the ZeroBot stressor. Super cool, and then we ran it through our original NLTK-based summarization and got that. Now, I don't know if you've ever disappointed a designer, but it's bad. They don't love it when you decide to take their nice, half-page text block and instead put in a bunch of SHA-256s. So, okay, perfect example of where we could go with this. So I was actually really excited when I got to give this talk knowing it's a movie theater because I could actually put up screenshots people will be able to read. So in this case, we use a pretty easy little scraping library to get the article. We pull the text out, and we use NLTK to generate the summary. This is the same way we did it previously, and as you can see, it's giving us SHA-256s all over the place. Not really ideal. So, little bit of basic, straight off their main page, walkthrough of how to do prompting for OpenAI, just in Python. And so in this case, we're giving it a couple really specific things. So we're giving it the prompt, summarize this into one paragraph, ignore indicators of compromise, security vendor tools, and contributors by name. Sorry if you were one of the people who wrote the zero-shot post. The other thing that helped a lot was tuning around this idea of these system messages. So in this one, we say, you are a cyber threat intelligence analyst with a concise, bluff writing style. I hope everybody knows what I mean by bluff. Bottom line up front. That is the way you want to write these exact kind of things. It makes your reading easier. It makes customers happier. Fantastic. So go ahead. Let's generate the summary. I'm not going to read this to you out loud, but as you can see, at the very least, it's not going to make my designer cry. So big win all around. So what's our take on the first one? Well, we experimented using programmatic summary generation from the OpenAI conversational endpoint. And to be honest, this was an easy yes. We moved all of our automation over to using this for summary generation. So big win right there. One-off data generation. So what do I mean by that? If you're doing cyber threat intelligence or really, any type of security, you're going to come across a time when you need a particular piece of data that's different or a one-off. In particular, when you're automating these things, you may need a new definitions file, a new way of, a list that you're going to scrape against, things like that. And those were the exact kind of things I'd go to Chandler and say, hey, I need all of the names of Microsoft's new threat groups because I need to map those over to something. Great. In this particular case, we ran into what are called demonyms, which I did not know was a name for a thing that exists, but that is the idea of what you call somebody from a particular place. And so in this case, we were looking for examples where a particular country was being mentioned, and that worked really well as long as people said China. But if they say Chinese, we were missing it. So we needed a way to map those things back to the ISO 31663 standard that we were using to note references to countries in content. So this is a one-off. I only need to do it once. I'm not going to go, build a whole automation around it. So I went straight to Copilot and said, "Hey, generate this for me." And it did it right for 5. Okay, not ideal. Can I have more, please? And it generated a lot more. Great, everything looks good. I scroll down to the bottom. And it stopped at M. Okay, can I have some more, please? And eventually, we get to you. All right, no please, I would like them all. And I finally get all the way to Zimbabwean. So okay, throw that in a text editor. It's a one-time thing. I go through, double check, make sure the ones that I'm looking for are actually there and actually match up with the value on the ISO 3166 standard. And we've got what we need. So it got integrated in, was used as an automation somewhere else. So for one-off stuff, do these tools really do what you want them to do? Sometimes. Sometimes with work. In this case, did it speed me up? Absolutely. I would not have gotten this done nearly as fast if I was trying to look all these up, and as far as I could tell, the best place to get this information was literally going to each Wikipedia page. I was not going to go to the world's Wikipedia pages and pull out these values and line them up. So I'd count this as a win. But let's do something trickier. So I told you right off the bat, we are doing everything with MITRE ATT&CK. And so one of the interesting tricks, and one of the things that I know MITRE's team spends a whole lot of time doing, is identifying MITRE ATT&CK techniques that they see in documents. Okay, so let's give it a try. Because right now what we're doing is a very regular expression-based approach. And so in this case, we'll say, gatekeeper bypass, and we're looking for examples of gatekeeper bypass in the text that we're analyzing. So can we do something better than that? Folks at Huntress actually do a really nice job of giving some relatively clean ones that make a good example for this. And in this case, they actually give you the mapping, although not like in a table or something you could easily download or input. So let's see if we can clean it up this way. So back to our OpenAI prompt, but at this point we've changed a couple things. So the prompt now says extract the MITRE attack techniques from the given text in a JSON format of, and I kind of gave an example of what I wanted it to look like, and then I changed the system role to you are a cyber threat intelligence automation outputting JSON data. And we get some stuff back. Okay, so let's run a test against it and see if they, nope, they are not in there. It is coming up with things that we are not finding the ones that we're looking for. So I thought it would be easier to do this and give it as a table. So in this case, I have on the left-hand side, here are the attack techniques it said were there. So in 2 cases, we had 1.5 true positives. It identified T1105 correctly, and it called out T1059, but if you go back and look at it, we didn't actually have T1059. We actually had the sub-techniques of T1059 instead. So 1059003. So not quite what we were looking for, and then it kind of threw in a couple other techniques that we'd never seen before. Okay, not ideal, but it was kind of an unstructured approach. I've wanted to play with LangChain, which is just an automation tool for working with these LLMs. Let's see if that can get us closer to what we want. So in this case, I move into LangChain, which I was excited about because it makes you kind of large language model agnostic. You can swap in and out different ones. And I give it this idea of what's called a tool mode, where you can essentially structure out what you want it to output, which will be more useful anyway, because taking arbitrary text and kind of scraping it to get the techniques I needed was kind of undoing everything I was just trying to do anyway. So in this case, I say, all right, I'm going to create an object. I want it to have the technique name, the sentence that it matched on, and I want to have the technique ID. And then LangChain changes a little bit about how you give direction in terms of what you do. So I say, you are an expert attack extraction algorithm, only extract relevant information from the text. If you don't know the value you're asked to abstract, just return null. I'd rather it not give me bad data. And then I give it the format they should be in, and I don't know how to spell should. I got into computers because spelling was so bad. So, I'm just leveraging the computer. And so in this case, this is what I get back. Well, that doesn't work. Now, again, this is where I say, maybe you're like the developer of LangChain and you have some ideas on what I did wrong, please come talk to me, but that's not gonna work for me at this point. So let's try again, because it seems like the automation might be the thing getting in my way. So I go back and start prompting directly. And so in this case, I literally just paste in the information from the post, and I say extract the MITRE attack techniques. I give it the format that I want. Oh, hey, that's actually correct. So, okay, what if I ask you to give it to me as JSON? That works. And so if I do this same thing again, you'll see my found and my true positive are in perfect alignment. That's pretty good. Now, what do I take away from this? Well, clearly I'm doing something wrong in how I'm prompting it, or how I'm doing it at least programmatically. I go back and change the formatting a little bit just for my own edification, but I'm gonna count this one a success, because ultimately speaking, we ended up getting in the end what we were looking for. It just didn't do it quite the way we wanted it to. So rather than claim, I'm calling it a mixed success. If you're a board gaming or a tabletop RPG fan, that might mean something to you. And I'm gonna say this one needs some continued work. The original call to the OpenAI conversation API didn't work. LangChain tool mode, I don't think I was using right, but we did show that in prompting, it actually did work as we expected. So we're gonna have to keep working at it. But let's do something even more complicated. So in this case, sticks to merging. So we very often run across situations where we are creating MITRE attack or content for attack that MITRE hasn't gotten to yet. Well, here's the fun part. MITRE eventually catches up. And so we end up in this situation where we'll have two objects, one that includes our data, one that includes their data, that are supposed to mean the same thing. And so something I've honestly been putting off for a long time is the idea that eventually we're going to need to reconcile this data together, and we're going to need to put these things into the same format. So that's really the original problem. We've had to do this in a handful of cases, and the answer, unfortunately, is just a lot of manual effort. So it's a lot of readjusting relationships, it's a lot of deprecating old things, adding new things, but the worst part is basically taking one intrusion set object and another intrusion set object and going, okay, which thing do we want from which one, and how do we put it together, and which one's more accurate, and all of that. So I go into my trusty Jupyter notebook, and I create two intrusion set objects. That's what MITRE ATT&CK calls a threat group. And I do one for APT28, have a lot of good information about what that is, and then I create one for Forest Blizzard, because Microsoft just had to go and change all of their threat and actor names, and now I've got to handle that. So, same format, mostly the same amount of information. You'll see the APT28 one has some things like secondary motivations that the Microsoft-based one doesn't. There's slightly different sets of dates, different goals, okay. So I go in, create another prompt. And in this case, I can't quite read it because I left it a little bit too small. But ultimately, I essentially say, I'm going to give you both of these objects. I want you to merge them together. And it turns out it does. Okay, this one actually really shocked me. I did not expect this was going to work quite as well as it did. So it turns out it actually picked up a couple of the values incorrectly. It duplicated some things, but it at least merged them together into a valid sticks bundle. Close, not exactly what I'm looking for, so let's keep playing with it. So in this case, we come through and prompt it again by tweaking to say, I only want one object and I need you to put the values together a little bit more efficiently. At which point, it gives it back to me. Now I'm skeptical, because if you've ever played with MITRE ATT&CK, it is incredibly finicky. It is a JSON standard that's based on an XML standard. If that doesn't scare you right off the bat, you haven't played with XML that much. But the result was, the first thing I did was basically say, can I parse this as valid JSON? Because that would be the first thing that it would get wrong. And it turns out, absolutely, we get valid JSON out of it. Then the part I go to is what I'm doing right here, which is I say, I want you to parse this into actual sticks too. So now not just is it valid JSON, but is it also valid sticks too? And it turns out it is. Now Microsoft's gone and solved this problem for me since then, but the point of being able to show that we can take two really complex, abstract pieces of information and have it correctly put them back together in a way that's still valid and parsable at the end, I gotta be honest, I did not expect this one was gonna work, and it did. So the experimentation was doing programmatic merging of sticks2 objects using OpenAI, and it seems to work. I don't know if it works enough yet to be able to put it into production, but I was really surprised at how effective it was. I'll give you a bonus one that really kind of is throughout this entire thing. Another really great AI use case, if you're not already playing with it, is code assistance. So I built almost all of this using GitHub Copilot, including the fact that those two sticks2 objects I just showed you, I didn't write any content for. It generated all of it for me. And it's pretty good. I'm a big believer that while not everyone in security necessarily needs to be a developer, being a developer is kind of like a superpower. You can do everything faster, you can get more done, you can be more verifiable, all of those things. And so if these types of tools like GitHub Copilot are able to make mediocre developers like me able to be a lot more efficient and effective, that's a really great place to be. So highly recommend playing with that as well. So what's our summary? Summary generation was successful and is now operational. One-off data generation was mostly successful, and I'm still using it as necessary. Attack technique extraction was a mixed success we're gonna keep experimenting with. And sticks to object merging was unexpectedly successful and might get operationalized relatively soon. So my point with all this is, this didn't even meet my initial expectations. And I'm really glad it didn't, because what it showed was the experimentation was worth the time. Again, I've had people all over the place who think they know what these tools are gonna do, but it's honestly so much easier and so much more effective to just take the time, pick a workflow, and see if it'll be effective rather than speculate. Because the speculation on one hand is that we're never gonna do anything with this, and the other one is that it's already taken over the world. And the answer, I'm sorry, somewhere in between. So what about Chandler? He's still at Utah State. He has another internship this summer. I tried to replace him by AI. I don't think it necessarily worked. But the other thing it did show me, and something I want to just say to this audience, is he is a senior in college. We do threat intelligence work. Generally speaking, that is not a place you see straight out of school kids going into and being effective. And I just want to put out there that Chandler was remarkably effective to the point that I just spent 3 months trying to replace him and kind of failed. And I say that just to say that this next generation is really doing some amazing things. They've got some incredible skills. And I highly recommend taking the time to work with students or bring in someone new, understanding that they might not have all the skills you expect right off the bat, but the amount they can pick up and the amount they can do is impressive. So in conclusion, LLMs can't really do everything, but they are great for certain specific tasks. I really recommend avoiding speculation and focusing on experimentation. And if at first you don't succeed, try different stuff. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we have 3 minutes left. We have Q&A available through Slido. You can go to bsidessf.org/Q&A to submit your questions. I'll be relaying them to our wonderful speaker, Scott, here. And if there's anything we can't cover, you will be able to catch up with Scott up in the mezzanine after this talk is over. First question we have through Slido is, if you had to do this again, would you use an LLM to manipulate JSON or use a separate process to combine or format LLM output?
Yes. I mean, I think it depends on the given task. For what I was doing, I think, again, I would have normally said I didn't think it would have worked as effectively as it did. So given the fact that it did work, I guess I'll say I'll let the LLM do it, because why reinvent the wheel if it seems to be working? Again, every time I tested the output, I kind of was going, this is where it's going to break. And I kept being wrong in the sticks to merging example. So kind of depends on the task.
Next question. Have you tried automatically extracting IOCs from threat intel reports with LLMs?
So I have not done that. Only because IOCs tend to be across really defined formats. And so, looking for a SHA-256, that's an easy thing to put a regex in. A IP address is a good thing to put a regex in. Where I was really going ultimately with the attack technique extraction is the fact that, you can describe a phishing email as a phishing email, a malicious email, an email with a malicious attachment. All of those things are trying to describe the same thing, and I'm trying to find ways to extract those types of relationships. So at the same token, every time you introduce a new LLM element, you're adding latency, you're adding time, you're adding cost, because you have to pay for your number of tokens and all that. So that is the exact kind of thing I would instead really focus on, using something that would be a lot faster, like a regex.
Our last question in from Rohit Kar. What's going to be your favorite demo of 2025 if this keeps going as well as you have so far?
Wow, that is a great question. So I'm really fascinated with the idea of trying to use these types of tools to build like breach and attack simulation stuff. So if I could take something like this and take a threat report and then be able to say, here's the atomic red team data to be able to run a simulation of this particular thing without having to wait for someone to generate it for me, I think that would be a really cool thing to be able to show.
All right. I think that's it for the Q&A. Everyone please give Scott a wonderful round of applause. Fantastic talk.